Hello and welcome to Global Voices Google Hangout series GB Face, the Hangout series where we talk about an issue that really matters to us. And today we're going to be talking about the Trump win in the US election. We're going to be talking to Elizabeth Rivera, who's our Latin America editor. She is based in Santiago, Chile. Ellery Biddle, who's currently based in Philadelphia and was canvassing the last few days. She is our Advocacy director. Mong Palatino, he is our Southeast Asia editor. He's based in Manila, Philippines. And Nevin Thompson, who is our Japan editor and social media editor, and he is based in Vancouver Island, Canada. My name is Sahabib Ghazi, and I'm the managing editor at Global Voices. I live right outside of San Francisco. So my first question for everyone is, how are you feeling? Just in one word or two words. Elizabeth?
Anxious, sad, perhaps a little bit angry. Still haven't figured out.
Ellery?
Scared, and it's weird because everything feels totally different but looks the same, and a lot of things are still the same.
Mong?
Well, curious and confused.
Nevin?
I would say angry and, I don't know, feeling of disbelief.
And I guess I'm feeling all of those emotions that everyone just kind of said. First up, I wanted to head over to you, Ellery, because you were canvassing the last few days in Philadelphia, which is in Pennsylvania, which was one of the swing states that did go for Trump. How are you feeling this morning?
I feel pretty bad. So I was canvassing, and which meaning knocking on doors and talking to people, and also making calls to Spanish-speaking voters, just to remind them to vote and encourage them to vote, both for Hillary Clinton, but also for the Katie McGinty for the Senate here and other local candidates. And I've done this a lot before. I've never done it in this job, and I know that what I do is journalism, at least some of the time, and that's a strange thing in the US to do that as a journalist, but I don't have qualms about it because I care so much about the public interest, and I just felt like I couldn't not do this. So, but my experience was really telling and scary. I was actually doing most of this volunteer work in north of the city in Bucks County, which is a mostly working class, white, Christian, and really economically depressed place, like a lot of the United States. And I was only talking to people who are registered Democrats. And many of them told me to go away. One woman told me, I explained what I was doing really quickly and, in a very kind way. And she said, I'd rather vote for my dog, get off my porch. And then she actually walked out and sat in her car and watched me walk down the street. Another guy told me he would rather vote for her husband, meaning Bill Clinton, but he'd never vote for her. So I guess after Monday and yesterday, I was a lot less surprised, I think, than I might have been if I hadn't been out there. But I mean, this is a district that voted for Obama in not in 2008, but in 2012.
So I'm hearing that, Ellery, and a lot of our contributors from around the world, and one of the fears that many people have expressed, including me, is that it's not that we're scared about Trump presidency, we're scared of the people that voted for him. But this makes me think it's not just about the people that voted for him, it's the people who didn't vote for Hillary. Elizabeth, how do you feel about that? You are also American. You voted in this election from abroad. How does that make you feel when you saw that this is the first time that we had a female presidential nominee, and then her candidacy and the campaign was plagued by scandal after scandal of misinformation.
Well, I think I got a mixed thoughts on that. Living in Chile, where women has been president for 2 terms, and actually in the past election, the main 2 candidates were women. So here, it's totally normal to have a competent woman running for president, right? So it was like, okay, like I didn't feel that. I don't know, rush of energy that having a woman president, as a historic event, because I've lived through that in another country, yeah, but I lived through that. But on the other side, I do see a lot of misinformation, a lot of, I personally not a fan of Hillary Clinton, but all the attacks she had made me a little bit, compassionate about what she's going through. I mean, really, her candidacy was a lot more attacked, from my point of view, from other candidacies that I've seen since I've been able to vote in the United States. So, so that's why I have a mixed feeling. The normalcy of living in a country that has already gone through that process, that totally sees it as a normal thing, to have either a woman or a man running for president, to seeing the other side, and I put it on quotes, progressive country that still tries to struggle with this gender issue and really has a machinery that goes and attacks a woman. I mean, but I don't see that was the main reason she lost, though. There were a lot of other things going on. And just saying that it was a gender thing, I think it's just the tip of it. Yes, there was a lot of attacks, but I don't think that was the reason she lost.
Nevin, you live on the internet, and I can say this confidently. You were watching this election very, very closely, paying close attention to Reddit and news coming in, things shifting. How did this play out for you?
I mean, I was totally surprised. I thought that, as you know, I thought that Trump was going to get totally destroyed in this, and I was wrong. And but I mean, they did talk about the different bubbles that people live in, and I suppose the bubble that I was inhabiting was the so-called center-left media elite bubble, or just nobody believed that it could happen. And in Canada, I don't think anybody believed it could happen. In Japan, nobody was paying attention. They thought that Donald Trump is. In Japan, folks think that Donald Trump is just a kind of a weirdo or just an out there candidate. But for me, I was totally surprised, as you know, and I don't know what to say.
Okay, so Mong is from the Philippines, and the Philippines elected president named Rodrigo Duterte this past summer. And he, in the West, has been compared to Donald Trump, but Mong actually believes that his win was closer to that of Barack Obama. So I wanted Mong to talk a bit about, how he sees Donald Trump rising in the U.S. and also the Eurocentrism of what he has seen happen in Philippines and how it's been portrayed in the media the last few months related to Duterte.
Yes, I have been watching programs and reading commentaries comparing Trump to our president. And I think the comparison is inaccurate and even unfair to Duterte. They are both controversial, and they often ridicule personalities. Our president even curses against church leaders, but the comparison stops there. For one thing, Duterte, our president, has good relations with the Muslim community. He's not a billionaire like Trump, and he enjoyed good relations with many marginalized groups in the Philippines. So, at the same time, in recent weeks, I've been also hearing from Duterte's critics about his similarities with Trump. And these similarities are being amplified in mainstream media. And I think even in Southeast Asia, Trump is being compared with other strong leaders in Southeast Asia. For example, the Prime Minister of Thailand, who is a former army chief, the Prime Minister of Cambodia, who has been Prime Minister for 3 decades. And the common with all of them is that they have all, forgive the language, foul mouth. And they are not apologetic if they insult women or the LGBT community. But I think it's simplistic to say that you have Trump-like leaders in Southeast Asia rising. For many critics of our president, we have Duterte-like leaders rising in America, as exemplified by Trump.
Ellery, you've spent a lot of time in Latin America. How did you see the comparison in this election season and what you've seen in?
Yeah. Well, Laura Vidal, our other Latin America editor who is from Venezuela, she and I were talking about the comparisons between Trump and Hugo Chavez, the former, now deceased president of Venezuela, and she ended up writing a great post out of it that we collaborated on, and you know, in terms of bombastic personality and media presence and media strategy, there's a lot of parallels to be drawn, but Chavez was actually in government and a socialist, and somebody who was really interested in and promoted policies of redistribution of resources and wealth. And some of that didn't work well, but it's, you know, they're really, really different in terms of policy and what they want for their countries. They're similar, I guess, in some of the ways that they express themselves, and also, you know, Chavez was sort of famous for being really, really demeaning to people in government and outside of government who he didn't like, and doing that very publicly and loudly. And so I think that's, you know, and that was something that in the US, that was sort of everyone's favorite thing to talk about. Oh, this crazy guy on Twitter. Well, we have a crazy guy on Twitter too. So, you know, I think as an American, what scares me at home is the fact that we now have a unified Republican government. It's not just, you know, it's one thing to have a president from one party and a Congress from another. That's not what we have. And the consequences for that for the rest of the world, we're going to have to watch unfold. And, you know, and I think Renata wrote me a message this morning and talking about building, you know, trying to think about international solidarity.
Renata is.
Renata Avila, who's a longtime GV contributor from Guatemala and very active on digital rights issues and human rights activism. And we started a conversation about international solidarity and really finding ways to build connections between we all have pressing and challenging situations in our own countries, and then things that we as global voices, as citizens of the world, kind of come together on. And so trying to figure out how to draw those connections in a proactive way right now, I think is really important.
Elizabeth, do you want to speak a bit about that too?
Well, yeah, I mean, we often use comparisons to try to explain ourselves something. And in this case, I think Trump and what just happened in the United States, it's not an isolated case, okay? So I think we should go a little bit beyond comparing the persona to the situation, which means, you know, economic stress and a political system that's clearly not working for everyone. And I'm not just talking about the US, I'm talking, you know, worldwide. So this kind of figures start to pop up, whether they're leftists like Chavez or rightists like Trump. They're starting to pop up more often. So this is not isolated, and I want to make a point about it, trying to get some of the thoughts that Hillary just put. We have to draw those bridges. What is going on everywhere that these kind of figures are, getting so much traction, and what can we do to try to, listen to the people who felt are not being listened, and thus go to the voting polls and cast their votes against someone instead of for a plan, like it happened in Brexit, which is very mentioned in Colombia recently for the peace process, in Hungary. There are a lot of very recent things going on, and so what can we learn from that? Instead of just trying to, again, going back into our bubble and trying to make comparisons, and you are from those there, and I'm from this group, and kind of put those figures in a cartoonish kind of way, what can we draw as a conclusion? What can we learn from this? And how can we build a better society for everybody? And so, yeah, I totally agree with the bridging idea, and I hope after this day passes with all the election hangover we're going through, we start talking about that in a positive way.
That totally resonates with me. And what I was thinking was this morning when I woke up and feeling dejected like many people, I thought, what is one thing that I can do that I haven't done in the past to change things? Because for me, bridge building it's been a different process. I live between different places. I have a full-time job. I'm a mother. Like, how do you find time to do the bridge building that really, really needs to be done? And for me, it was something as simple as looking forward. Certain things that we believe in are going to be struggling, and they're already struggling. Like, for example, Planned Parenthood. What can I do as an individual that could possibly help an organization that is struggling, that's very important, and is going to be struggling even more in the U.S. in the next 4 years? And this has to do with women's health issues, the right to abortion, the right to making decisions about your own body. So I feel like as an individual, we need to kind of look at micro issues like that, but then also macro. So all of us, we're in the digital rights space. We're global activists. We meet fellow activists from around the world. We're in touch with them. Our social media bubbles are very different from other people. We have this like our local bubble, and then we also have this like very mixed international group of people who believe in building bridges and commonality. So what's the one tangible thing do you think that we can kind of do? And I'm really interested in also hearing Nevin, Mong, and Elizabeth, how you feel about this, but also Ellery, because when I look at the digital rights community, oftentimes I see digital rights activists from the global south. They kind of come to the U.S. thinking that the U.S. is going to set they set the standard for what human rights are. And then to see someone who rose on a campaign of bigotry and intolerance and sexism to get this far, how do you kind of renegotiate that space?
I don't know. I think there's, the digital rights community is a mixed bag, but that there is some, there's plenty of healthy skepticism about the narrative and the actual adherence to human rights and civil rights, like within the United States, but also by the United States around the rest of the world. I think, I'll write something about this. I think that the Trump win really makes me worried for media freedom in this country and elsewhere. Even, already I kind of have found myself holding back from tweeting things, and we've seen all of the kinds of threats that he's made to media figures, to reporters in the past, and also his, I'm not sure what's going to happen with this cable news channel that he bought recently that's called Trump TV. But I think I sort of find myself focusing there first, because if our pretty big and messy and not perfectly diverse, but active media here, if people are afraid to talk or to write, or if they find themselves sort of holding back, then I don't know what that means for the rest of this movement around access to information and protecting information from censorship. I think that I find myself most focused on just the simple question of whether any individual, whether a journalist or just a citizen who cares and wants to say something, it suddenly feels afraid to do that. I know that that's been true for many of us for a long time, that Trump winning
is a reality around most
this isn't really changing things for a lot of people, but to have this person in this immense position of power who we kind of know wants us to shut up is scary. And I want to be firm about that.
Nevin, Mong?
I was just going to jump in and say that in Canada, well, I think the implications for freedom of speech are pretty profound because, like was said earlier, the US is perceived as the gold standard around the world for freedom of speech. Maybe perceived within the US, I don't know. But if you don't have some sort of strong culture saying this, we need to have freedom of speech and all that sort of stuff, then I think maybe it's going to slide. In Canada, freedom of speech and freedom of privacy is more of a gray area. We've seen over the past couple of weeks that the Canadian government actually authorizes essentially spying on journalists in Canada. And Mayor of Montreal, I believe, or I think it was Quebec City, one of those two cities, sorry. A journalist in Canada was just inquiring about a parking ticket that a mayor of a large city in Quebec got waived. And in retaliation, the mayor seems to have asked the local police force to investigate this reporter's phone records. And this has not caused much of any kind of discussion in Canada, So it's not like, the thing is though that we now with I suppose the Trump presidency, well, maybe that's just sort of the way things are. In Japan, the other country that I'm deeply connected to, I'm more optimistic because Japan is essentially a liberal democracy. It's very conservative, but I don't know, you don't have the same, it might seem hard to believe, but there's not the same authoritarian tendencies in Japan, or if there are, well, I don't know. I'm just more optimistic. There is more. There is a new national secrets law, and so there has been a chilling effect because of that. But there's a very strong, and people will dispute this, but I would say there's a very strong tabloid press that can, to a certain degree, even though it's part of the power structure, it can hold politicians accountable. But the other interesting thing is that for Japan, I don't think anything's really changed because the big movement in Japan has been to change Japan's constitution, so it makes it easier for Japan to essentially go to war, and this has been with the encouragement of the Obama administration, and that means ripping up the Japan's so-called peace constitution. And so for as far as I'm concerned with Trump in terms of defense and civil liberties in Japan, it's actually kind of the status quo, because also Trump wants Japan to do more for its self-defense. So I don't know, but I still think that it's not good what happened in the States, and it's not great for the idea of freedom of speech and so on, which is so central, I believe, to the American character. Because Americans are always, whenever I talk with them, have been very passionate about the First Amendment. So it's for me, it's kind of a very bad sign.
Mong?
Yeah, I think many people here in the Philippines are curious about Trump's economic policies, especially those that will have large impact on trade, on American investments. We have a big BPO sector here, and many in the past few days have expressed fears that these jobs could be taken away from them There's also some concern about Trump's immigration policies. As you know, there is a big Filipino community Asian community in the United States. So these are some issues that I think many people now are beginning to contemplate, because to be frank, many of us here are preparing for a Clinton presidency, but not Trump's. I mentioned earlier about the comparison with Duterte. I think the positive thing about that comparison is that we can remind the president, don't be like Trump. Don't be a divisive, don't be a divisive figure. Imagine how you impact, how you offend people. That's how you impact when you speak and insult many people. So I think with Trump in White House, our president can have a mirror image of himself in some ways.
Elizabeth?
Yeah. I was just reflecting on what you guys were saying, and well, I have 2 points. One, we've seen so many populist governments in Latin America that the pessimistic kind of thoughts that are floating around have a background to support that. So that's on one hand. So we know that kind of figure, again, doing the comparisons, often end up battling, for human rights, all across the spectrum of human rights. So that's one thing to be worried about, because the difference is that our governments tend to be more unstable, and we kind of looked up to the United States to set up example, and now it's like, now we don't have anyone to look up to, So, and on the other hand, I've heard a lot of analysis during the morning from different channels here in Chile and also in Mexico, on how this is just a validation on the left not being the answer for people. So there's a lot of right-wing talk going on that worries me too, that will keep on just see, the United States did this, so they prove us right, that we should not leave, be so open, and we just be more protective and be more, so they're taking the bad example from that, and now, and setting that as an argument for the right-wing views. So that started to worry me. So those are the 2 points I just wanted to make about that. So I see, going back to my worry, so sorry about that.
In some ways, I think about what Ellery said and what Nevin said about free speech and press issues, and I think that should be, that's really the only kind of signal or sign we can get from Trump, because we haven't gotten a lot of information about what he is, because he's never been in office. We don't really know the kind of person he's going to be. All that we know is during this election campaign, he was very comfortable with kicking the media out and telling journalists to get lost, and saying that the system is rigged, and kind of retreating that way. We don't know where he stands on other issues. We don't know, a couple of names have been put up for the kind of cabinet he wants, and, they're pretty right-wing there. But in some ways, U.S. foreign policy the last 8 years was just a continuation of what Bush did. So, I just don't think we really know what a Trump presidency is going to be. But as an individual, as a Muslim American, I feel like things are going to get worse, because constitutionally, they shouldn't have been able to do all the things that they've been doing the last 15 years in terms of surveillance of people from my community, but they did. The Muslim population is tiny in the U.S., and we don't really have figures on how many people have been victims of surveillance. But I think if we did, the numbers would be really, really high, because I know so many people whose doors have been knocked by the FBI. And I have never even set foot in a mosque in the Bay Area in the last 7 years that I've lived here. So that's how pervasive surveillance of Muslim Americans is. And then I look at, other people of color within my community here, and they say they've always been stopped when they're walking, at least, once in their lifetime by a cop. So there is racial profiling that happens. And that was happening under President Obama the last 8 years. So, and constitutionally, none of this stuff should actually be allowed to happen, but it does happen. So then now we have the Trump presidency coming in. So is it going to get worse, or is it going to be a continuation, as Nevin said? I actually have no idea. But I am worried about when it comes to free speech, because it seems like he doesn't really get the importance of free speech. And we have seen signals that this could be a growing problem. And I look at the rest of the world, Elizabeth and Nevin and Mong. You will see this well when we look at the US and when we look at and even Ellery, when we look abroad. The big difference is that self-censorship really hasn't been a problem here in the US. People feel free to say what they want, write what they want, and maybe that's going to become a reality. So it is pretty daunting at many levels.
Mind if I jump in? Or
yes,
you
go for it. Go for it.
Just on a more sort of micro level, I think that one of the things that what you say about the Obama years and before, surveillance of people of color in the United States has been happening for a long time, and it's not constitutional. And it was like we being a bigger, maybe a majority, or maybe just the bubble that, of New York Times readers or whatever. There was an increasing awareness in the United States about this from 2013 forward, right? From the Snowden leaks. And what was starting to happen was people, in individual states, individual cases, authorities were being challenged in court. There was litigation, litigation going on in regard to really specific practices of police departments and other authorities on that level. I don't know what happens now, because we aren't going to have this Justice Department for very much longer. And I don't know, and I don't know what's going to happen to the Supreme Court either. And it scares me to think that the institutions that are scary is supposed to be this, it's supposed to be structured in a way to challenge this, the things that we think are wrong or that go against our Constitution. And I legitimately worry that even that is going to become much less possible given this majority this unified Republican government that we're about to have.
I really would like to end this on a, quasi forward-looking note, but I really can't find one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you, what is any light that you see at this moment, any hope? And it could just be uncertain, So Ellie, if you want to go first, and then we'll just make our way through that way.
Yes, uncertainty is certainly a word. Anxious too, and certainly with an urge, a personal urge of doing a little bit more to build bridges. From where I'm standing, from what I'm doing every day, it's like this is urgent for me now. It's like bam in my face. So, yeah, these are the feelings.
Mong?
Well, I think it could lead to greater solidarity and closer links between activists from around the world and activists based in the United States. That there will be common struggles and more interactions and more activities that on how to prevent the rise of Trump in another country, or how to help American activists as well. And at this time, show solidarity to all, especially those who sacrificed a lot. I think that's one thing that we could look forward to.
Nevin?
Well, I guess I was going to say that maybe we can hope for an Arnold Schwarzenegger type president. That might be a good thing. A joke. But I mean, yeah, I can't really think of anything good. But, you know, as I was saying to my son, you know, it's never good to engage.
But you know, you can think of something good, because everyone talks about Justin Trudeau, but no one talks about who was there before Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I was actually just reading earlier before the call that you know, Trump could have been defeated this election, and this could be a wake-up call in the next round of elections to try to figure out a candidate who could beat this guy, because it's gonna be a weird few years, right? And I think people are gonna realize that this guy is nuts. So that's a good thing. But also it's just a good reminder to not engage. I just try to say to myself, don't engage in catastrophic thinking. You never know what's going to happen. Be honest with yourself. But things can change, and he might be more of a Schwarzenegger than a Mussolini. That's about all I can. But yeah, but there could be a Justin Trudeau, and you know how much I love Justin Trudeau. There could be a Justin Trudeau that comes after Trump.
Because what was there before Justin Trudeau?
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, we had in Canada, you know, 8 years of Stephen Harper, who's a conservative. Which a conservative in Canada, by the way, would be actually a Democrat in the United States. But we had Stephen Harper, who I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the analysis of Harper, but he was perceived as a right-wing, anti-civil liberties prime minister. But at the end of the day, he was very much like, in terms of his policies, very much like the Liberals are now. But the only difference has been that Trudeau is sunnier and is also is shown true leadership when it comes to all Canadians. Because the previous government, towards the end of their term, the previous Canadian government, the Conservative government under Harper, was very anti-Muslim. It was very socially conservative, and also tried to do voter suppression. I think voter suppression is one of those stories from the American election we haven't heard very much about, but they also tried to engage in voter suppression. And what happened, though, is that Canadians didn't like all that stuff. We don't like the negative stuff. Generally speaking, we are proud of our inclusive society, and they kicked the Conservatives out because in favor of Justin Trudeau, who as I said, has shown true leadership when it comes to embracing and celebrating all Canadians. So that is the light of the tunnel, I think, as people will see this gang of thugs that have taken over temporarily in the States, and hopefully will vote them out the next opportunity they get.
Ellery?
Okay, I tried my best. So I think that, no surprise to hear this from me, I think that defending and exercising free expression when and where we can is really more important than ever, because that's how you build understanding, right? It's how you build bridges, both, I mean, for me, within my country, but also between, as Mong was saying, building solidarity between groups in different parts of the world. We have to get that in the United States. People in the US are real slow on that, but I think that as much as it feels like this incredible division right now, that we have to look on one hand at the fact that actually more people voted for Hillary Clinton, right? She won the popular vote. So a lot of people want a compassionate and bridged and not divided, but sort of a unified feeling about the world. And we have to figure out how to like make that make sense to more people. And we'll do that with our voices.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Elizabeth, Ellery, Mong, and Nevin. This is GB Face, the Global Voices Hangout series. Thanks for joining.
Bye.